Welcome visitor, my name is Declan and this is 15th part of the WoW Player's Diary. Operation Gnomergan and Zalazan must fall. In early September 210, a small event took place in WoW, or rather two events since they were different for each faction. The Horde liberated the Echo Isles, and the Alliance helped the Gnomes reclaim Gnomergan. The events were called Zalazan Must Fall and Operation Gnomergan, and I didn't participate in the Horde event because I didn't have outs on that side, but I did provide brotherly assistance to the Gnomes. For those unfamiliar with the lore, let me remind you. Before the Third War, the Gnome capital of Gnomergan was attacked by Trogs. High Tinka Mekatok, the Gnome King at the time, trusted his chief mechanic, Thermal Plug. As a result, Gnomergan was subjected to radioactive irradiation to drive out Trogs. Initially this worked, but then the Gnomes themselves began to die from the radiation. Most of the capital population fled to Iron Forge, and the rest either died or mutated. Thermal Plug not only turned into a mutant, but also proclaimed himself the sole ruler of Gnomergan. Now, many years later, Mekatok called upon his brethren and the forces of the Alliance to retake the capital. The Horde event involved players helping Dark Spear Thralls, led by Wol'Jin, retake the Echo Isles. The events were short and rewards weren't particularly curly, well, not so amazing, but a little movement in Azeroth's static world is always fun. Plus, the Gnomes and Trolls received new certain locations, which also was good. Waiting for the storm. One piece of news that once stirred up the community was a blue post from a Blizzard employee stating that Zul Group, the vanilla 20-man raid instance, would no longer be a raid. Zul Group is gone as a raid instance come Cataclysm. Worried players began discussing this with trepidation, lamenting another sacrilege by Blizzard. Truthfully, Zul Group hadn't been a relevant raid instance for a long time, at least not formally. Only some old-timers and nostalgic players still stick at level 60 would attempt it with 20 people. After the Wrath of the Lich King release, it was actively being solo farmed. I remember as a blue-green gear at level 80 I could easily handle trash packs, while more skilled guildmates in raid gear were soloing Zul Group bosses all the way up to Haka, and players in tier 10 could easily take him down. The instance was certainly luxurious, no doubt, but by and large not only mount collectors still went there. After Cataclysm release, these mounts were supposed to be removed from Zul Group, which was stated to remain a questing zone until patch 4.1. What else was going to be removed? The titles Immortal and Undying. These titles were awarded for completing Naxxramas 10 and 25-man versions, and without a single death in the raid. It sounds simple, but players were already in overgear from ICC, but people still died in Naxxramas in the fall of 210. Why? Well, imagine lagging during the Hygan dance and not reaching a safe spot. Well, that's it, no achievement. Or perhaps your internet connection dropped while circling around Tadius. However, deaths also occurred due to simple, slacking and by less skilled players. I remember one friend complaining he died on Hagen precisely because of such an oversight by someone else. I think I wouldn't be wrong to say many were in high spirits, eagerly awaiting the new expansion. The old world rework wasn't just about appearance and zone design. Quests were also undergoing a global overhaul. The chronology changed dramatically too. Events in the original zones would now take place after the Northrend campaign. In theory, this should have reignited the interest of veterans who had grown weary of the old continents over the preceding 5 years. New players, meanwhile, could immediately dive into current events without slogging through months of outdated content. Well, in other words, the concept itself looked sound and promising. I'll explain later why it all went down the drain, but at the moment everything looked as good as it possibly could. In October 2010, Blizzard reported that subscribers' numbers had reached 12 millions. The project was being developed by one of the world's leading game studios with extensive experience. Other MMOs in the European and American markets were nowhere near WoW's level. EverQuest 2, a contemporary, stood modestly on the sidelines with its 26 servers, and its transition to free-to-play state didn't inspire optimism about its future. Newer projects were often positioned like WoW killers, like Star Wars of the Old Republic, for instance, but was menacingly hissing the lightsabers, and at the time it seems like a real contender for a King of the Mountain. As the future showed, neither Rift, nor Guild Wars 2, nor Star Wars of the Old Republic managed to push WoW off its throne. Even after the disastrous year of 211, when the first serious player exodus began, WoW held its ground. Its competitors were still far behind. Wrath of the Lich King. Conclusion. October 210, Wrath of the Lich King expansion was going to its end. Even now, looking back from 225, more than 15 years later, I can say that the second expansion was a kind of milestone of the project's history. Why? Well, let's dive deeper. From a plot perspective, it marked the end of the Lich King era, an iconic character central to storyline since Warcraft 3. For some players, his death signified the end of the Warcraft story. They viewed the subsequent fuss with the Deathwing as a heresy and foolishness, and consequently left the game. I understand them now because after the battle for Azeroth expansion and Shadowlands announcement, I feel similarly. My Warcraft ended with Legion expansion. Regardless, this chapter was closed, plot-wise, an entire era finally ended. What did Wrath of the Lich King become in terms of game systems and gameplay? There was an opinion, zealously supported by veteran old fox, that Wrath of the Lich King was a step, or even two, towards casual players. Simplification of content and casualization, these were common refrains. But was it really so? I think not quite. Yes, you could get into Icecrown Citadel and clear it in normal mode, and it was much easier than, well, say, Sunwell Plateau and its prime. But was it truly about simplification? Rather, we were dealing with the expansion of difficulty spectrum. Before there was primarily one mode, very difficult. Then Wrath of the Lich King, like many other computer games, introduced modes like normal, difficult, and even very difficult, if we consider achievements like Alone in the Darkness. Moreover, these changes affected not only the endgame but other game content as well. Yes, lowering the level requirements and prices for mounts might have felt like an insult to game veterans, but on the other hand, why not? I remember leveling my main in the Barrens before patch 2.4.3, the first price and level reduction for mounts. A quest giver would be on a wretched hill, and the quest objectives would be on opposite part of the zone, on the coast or even in islands. You had to run back and thaw on food. Perhaps such things were design flaws which the availability of mount at level 20 minimized. After all, it's an old truth. A car isn't a luxury but a means of transportation. Do you want checkers or a ride? Well, meaning, do you want to show off or just get going? Most people, especially at low levels, just need to ride. If you need checkers to stand out, then attempt Yok 0 and earn Mimiron's head. But let's return to the endgame. I think the Burning Crusade raiders remember it well how difficult it was to gain an access to high-level content. To get into Karajan, you had to complete a long quest chain involving heroic dungeon runs, and to get into these heroics, you first had to earn honorary reputation with the various outland factions. Without going into detail, you had to work hard. This was an implicit content gating system, which Wrath of the Lich King was replaced by gradual boss access within raids. Of course, it would have been nice if access unlocked after completing quests, but not such arduous ones. And after patch 3.2, when the emblem system was reformed and useful features like raid save extensions were introduced, the accessibility of raid content became even higher. Was this good or bad? I think it was good. The division into normal and hard modes led to an expansion of difficulty spectrum. If you wanted to go fight, there you go, normal mode. If you wanted to bang your head against the wall, here where the boss's hard faces bang away and eventually you'd get some special perks and nice pixels. In my opinion, Wrath of the Lich King was good precisely because it offered a choice. Newly minted level 80s were given opportunities to progress with a path leading towards hardcore play while still leaving room for casual engagement. Before it was either raiding as a second job or pumping up and out. Now you could experience the endgame without dedicating your life, and well, that was not so bad, despite all the complaints. And when were there complaints? The game became comfortable for many. In other words, Wrath of the Lich King wasn't a casualization of the game in a purely negative sense. Rather, the complexity of the endgame and some mechanics that simply delayed progression were streamlined. The same applied to level 1 to the cup. Perhaps this was one of the reasons Wrath of the Lich King saw the peak of its game popularity and why this expansion is still called one of the best. Well, that's it for today, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, give it thumb ups and subscribe to the channel. Well, to be continued. Thank you very much for your attention.